Your mind never stops, not when the day ends, not when the room goes quiet, not when everyone around you has moved on from a conversation you are still living inside. You have tried everything to make it stop, and it comes back every single time, because what you have been calling overthinking is not a habit, it is not a personality trait, it is not just the way you are, it is a wound. And today, for the first time, you are going to understand exactly where it came from. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that nobody talks about. Not the exhaustion of working too hard or sleeping too little. The exhaustion of living inside your own mind at full volume every hour of every day without a single moment of genuine quiet. Overthinkers do not choose this. Nobody wakes up one morning and decides to spend the next decade replaying conversations, reliving disasters that never arrive, and turning every unanswered message into evidence of something falling apart. It happens gradually, so gradually that by the time it becomes unbearable, it has already been happening for years. And the most devastating part is this: the mind doing it believes it is helping. Every scenario it runs, every outcome it prepares for, every version of events it rehearses, all of it feels like due diligence, like responsible preparation, like the only thing standing between you and the version of events where everything goes wrong. And so you let it continue, because stopping feels reckless, because silence feels suspicious, because somewhere along the way your brain learned that staying one step ahead of pain was the only reliable form of safety available to you. That is not overthinking, that is survival. And it began long before you had the language to name it. In a moment or a series of moments where something unexpected happened, and the pain of it landed hard enough that the brain made a quiet, permanent decision. Never be caught off guard again. Never walk into something unprepared. Never let the world surprise you with something you could have seen coming if you had just thought about it hard enough. And so the thinking began. And it has not stopped since. And this is where it stops being personal and starts being biological. Because what you have been carrying, the noise, the loops, the relentless mental commentary that follows you from the moment you wake up to the moment you finally exhaust yourself into sleep, is not a reflection of who you are. It is a reflection of what your nervous system learned to do in an environment that made hypervigilance necessary. And until you understand the mechanism behind it, the actual biological reason your brain will not stop, you will spend the rest of your life fighting a symptom, while the wound beneath it continues to drive everything. The amygdala is the part of the brain responsible for detecting threat. In a regulated nervous system, one that developed in a predictable, emotionally consistent environment, the amygdala does its job efficiently. Something potentially threatening appears. The amygdala flags it. The prefrontal cortex, the rational, reasoning part of the brain, evaluates it. A measured response is produced. The threat passes. The system returns to baseline. But in a nervous system that was shaped by early experiences of emotional unpredictability, by environments where the rules changed without warning, where love was inconsistent, where safety was something that could disappear without explanation, this process breaks down. The amygdala stops waiting for actual threats. It starts scanning for the possibility of threats, constantly, automatically, below the threshold of conscious thought. And because it has been trained to read small signals as early warnings, a shift in tone, a delayed response, a silence that feels slightly different, it begins treating ordinary moments of uncertainty as emergencies that require immediate mental action. And that mental action is thinking. Obsessive, circular, exhausting thinking, not because the mind enjoys it, but because the nervous system has learned that thinking is the only tool available for managing a threat before it arrives. If you can just figure out every possible way this could go wrong, if you can just anticipate every outcome, prepare for every scenario, stay one step ahead of every possible pain, then maybe this time you will not be blindsided. The thinking feels like control, and control for a nervous system that once had none feels like survival. But here is what the research consistently shows, and what nobody tells the people sitting inside this pattern: the thinking does not reduce the fear, it feeds it. Every catastrophic scenario the mind generates is processed by the amygdala as though it is actually happening. The body responds with cortisol, the heart rate rises, the nervous system activates, and the brain, interpreting this physical response as confirmation that there is something real to be afraid of, thinks harder. It is a loop with no natural exit, and you have been running it not because something is fundamentally wrong with you, but because the brain is doing exactly what it was trained to do, exactly what it needed to do once, in an environment that no longer exists. exists for a version of you that no longer needs this level of protection. The tragedy is not that the brain learned this. The tragedy is that nobody ever taught it that things had changed. Everything stops here for a second. Because what is about to be said, most people will recognize it not as new information, but as the description of something they have been living inside for years without ever having the words for it. The loop is not just the thinking. The loop is the relationship between the thinking and the relief that never comes. It works like this: something uncertain happens. The mind begins generating explanations. The explanations produce more uncertainty. The uncertainty produces more thinking. And the thinking, instead of resolving anything, simply creates new questions that require more thinking to answer. Around and around, getting louder with each rotation, going nowhere. And the cruelest part of this loop is that it mimics productivity. It feels like you are working on something. Like all of this mental effort is moving you toward an answer, a resolution, a version of the situation that finally makes sense and allows you to stop. But the resolution never arrives. Because the mind is not actually trying to solve the problem in front of it. It is trying to solve a much older problem, one that has no solution available in the present moment, because the problem belongs to the past. Every loop has an origin. Not in the conversation you are currently replaying. Not in the relationship you are currently analyzing. Not in the decision you cannot currently make. The origin is earlier than all of that. It is in the moment, or the accumulation of moments, where the world first demonstrated that uncertainty leads to pain. That not knowing what is coming means not being able to prevent what hurts. That the only defense against being blindsided is to never stop thinking long enough to be caught off guard. That is the real loop. Not the thoughts themselves, but the belief underneath them that thinking is the only thing keeping you safe. And because that belief lives below the level of conscious awareness, because it was formed before language, before reason, before you had any framework for understanding what was happening to you, it operates invisibly. You experience the thoughts without seeing the belief driving them. You try to manage the symptoms without knowing the cause. You spend years developing strategies for quieting a mind that is not loud because it is broken, but because it is still faithfully executing a protection strategy that has not been updated since childhood. This is why willpower does not work. This is why telling yourself to stop, to relax, to let it go produces approximately 4 minutes of quiet before the loop restarts louder than before. Because the instruction is being delivered to the wrong part of the brain. The prefrontal cortex hears you, it agrees with you, it would very much like to stop. But the amygdala, the part actually running the loop, does not speak the language of reason. It speaks the language of felt safety, of accumulated experience, of what the body has learned to expect from the world over years of living in it. And until that part of the brain receives a different message, not a thought, but an experience, the loop continues. Here is what that means in real terms. The loop will not stop because you understand it intellectually. Reading this, nodding along, recognizing yourself in every word, that alone changes nothing. Understanding is the beginning. It is not the destination. The destination is the moment your nervous system, not your mind, your nervous system learns that uncertainty is survivable. That not knowing the outcome does not mean the outcome will be devastating. That you can sit inside the discomfort of an unanswered question and come out the other side intact. That moment does not arrive through thinking. It arrives through experience. Small, repeated, deliberately chosen experiences of staying present inside uncertainty without reaching for a thought to make it manageable. Of letting the discomfort exist without immediately trying to solve it. Of choosing again and again and again to remain in the room with the unknown instead of retreating into the familiar territory of the loop. Each time you do that, each time you feel the pull of the spiral and choose differently, something shifts in the nervous system. Something small, almost imperceptible, but real. And over time, those small shifts accumulate into something that looks, from the outside, like calm and feels, from the inside, like finally coming home to a version of yourself you forgot existed. This is the part that is hardest to hear, because at some point, without choosing it, without realizing it was happening, you stopped seeing overthinking as something you do, and started seeing it as something you are, the careful one, the one who thinks things through, the one who never acts without considering every angle first, the one who sees problems coming before anyone else does. And that identity has served you in real ways, the attention to detail that others miss, the preparation that has saved you from genuine mistakes, the depth of consideration that people in your life have come to rely on. These are not nothing. These are real qualities that emerged from a real pattern, and they have produced real results in your work, your relationships, your ability to navigate a world that genuinely does require thoughtfulness. But there is a cost that comes with that identity that nobody talks about. The relationships that never reach their full depth, because full depth requires a level of uncertainty you have not been able to tolerate. The version of yourself that shows up in rooms already partially absent, present in body, but spending spending the entire time monitoring the emotional temperature of everyone around you, reading faces, adjusting, calculating, trying to stay one step ahead of a dynamic that has not even become complicated yet. The moments that pass through you without being felt, because you were too busy thinking about them to actually live inside them. And here is the identity hit that lands hardest: the overthinking that you have been treating as a form of intelligence, as evidence of depth, as the thing that makes you different from people who act without thinking, is also the thing that has been keeping you from the life that exists on the other side of all that analysis. The decision you did not make because the mind kept generating more information to process until the window closed. The relationship you held at arm's length because something felt uncertain and uncertainty stopped feeling tolerable somewhere along the way. The version of yourself that could have existed that does exist underneath all of it, who makes decisions from instinct rather than analysis, who sits in conversations without running simultaneous commentary, who can let good things be good without immediately beginning the search for the reason they might not last. That version of you is not a fantasy. It is not something you have to construct or become for the first time. It is who you were before the world taught you that your thoughts were the only reliable thing standing between you and everything falling apart. It is the self that existed before the monitoring became automatic, before the loop became the default, before peace started feeling like something to be suspicious of rather than something to be inhabited. And the path back to that version of yourself does not begin with thinking differently. It begins with understanding that the identity you built around overthinking, as careful, as considered, as the person who never gets caught off guard, was never really yours to begin with. It was the armor, not the person wearing it. The brain that overthinks is not permanently broken. That is the most important thing the research tells us. And it is the thing that people who have lived inside this pattern for years have quietly stopped believing. Because when something has been happening long enough, when the loop has been running so consistently, so automatically, so deeply woven into the fabric of daily life, it stops feeling like a pattern and starts feeling like a permanent condition. It is not. The brain retains the capacity to change its own architecture for the entirety of a human life. New experiences create new neural pathways. New patterns of response become possible. The nervous system that learned to treat uncertainty as danger can learn through repeated, embodied experience that uncertainty is survivable, that the discomfort of not knowing does not have to be escaped through thinking, that the present moment can be trusted even when the outcome is unclear. This is not positive thinking. This is neuroscience, and the way it happens is not dramatic. It does not arrive in a single moment of breakthrough or revelation. It arrives in the accumulation of small, deliberate choices made quietly, without audience, without applause, to stay present inside discomfort instead of retreating into the loop, to feel the pull of the spiral and choose differently, to sit with an unanswered question long enough to discover that the not knowing is survivable. Each of those moments rewires something, slowly, invisibly, permanently. You have been thinking for a very long time about everything, about everyone, about every version of every situation that could have gone differently. And somewhere inside all of that thinking, somewhere in the years spent inside your own head, you lost something. Not your mind, yourself. The version of you that existed before the thinking became a reflex, before the monitoring became automatic, before stillness started feeling like something to be suspicious of rather than something to be inhabited. That version of you is not gone. It has been here the entire time, underneath the noise, underneath the loop, underneath the identity you built around being the one who always thinks things through. You survived everything that taught you the world was unsafe, every moment that made hypervigilance feel like the only responsible way to move through life. You survived all of it. And you are still here. The quiet you have been searching for, the real quiet, does not need to be earned or prepared for. It has been here the entire time, waiting for you to stop thinking long enough to feel it.